So if this is your first time at Test Prep, my name is Robin Hooper, and I am the Agent Services Coordinator at the Keller Williams office in Kirkland. What that means is I help new agents coming into the business, first getting started. I help with the school process, testing, obviously. And then once you join the company, I help with next steps and how to move forward and get your career going. So thank you guys so much for hopping on here with me. We're going to go through some tips and tricks for passing the exam. We're going to talk about what you can expect on the exam so that you're totally prepared as much as you can be. And I'm going to give you guys a study guide. And then the last 25 minutes or so, we'll go through any topic that you want. If you guys have a request, a specific topic that maybe you're struggling with more than others, we can tackle that and go through it together. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. I like to start every test prep with tell me something good. We do this a lot at Keller Williams. It's part of our culture. We start all of our team meetings this way, just asking you, what is going good in your life? Did you schedule your test? Did you just finish school like Caleb did? Or what's something awesome happening in your life?
I am taking my test next Wednesday.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and I've taken 2 mock exams, and I got about 85 on all of them. So I'm
great.
Feeling somewhat confident.
Yeah, that's really great. Awesome. And so that's St. Patrick's Day, right? Next Wednesday, the 17th. So hopefully you'll have a little bit of Irish luck testing that day. Does anybody else want to share anything before we move on? So I want to start with some study tips. I have been doing these test prep sessions for about 2 years. And so with that time, I've kind of started to see some patterns of if people don't pass the first time or if they're really struggling to retain material. I kind of hear the same stories over and over. So based on that, I did some research and pulled up some articles about study habits and how to most effectively use your time so that you pass the first time. With that, none of these are my original ideas. I want to share first. I got all of this from, I think it was North Carolina, whatever the Tar Heel school is. I think I got the article from there. But I want to just touch on a few of these things. Firstly, I've had a lot of people say, I've read the material over and over again, or I've taken the practice exams over and over again. Is there anything else I should be doing to study? And yes, absolutely. The practice exams and reading, of course, are helpful. Reading, of course, to learn the material, and then the practice exams to kind of gauge where you're at. However, if those are your only 2 study methods, I'm not sure how effective that's going to be. When you're reading something, unless you are taking notes as well, highlighting, cross-referencing other materials, you're not as actively engaged in that material as you would be using a few other study methods that we will touch on. And then with the practice exams, so those are not intended to be your sole method of studying. Those are intended for you to take periodically to see where you're at in the material. What kind of scores are you getting? Regardless of the school that you chose, there's a limited amount of practice exams that you have access to. With Rockwell, I believe it's 3 online. So if you're taking those same 3 practice exams over and over and over, at some point you're going to start memorizing those questions. And it's not that you've learned the material, it's that you've memorized the answers, which will really bite you in the butt when you go to take the test. So again, use those practice exams maybe once a week or once every other week, depending on how soon you're testing, to see if you're getting high enough scores to be ready to take the exam. On those practice exams, if you're getting an 80, 85 or higher, then you're ready. Unless this is the 30th time you've taken that practice exam, then that might just mean that you've memorized the info. And then I want to talk about really focusing your efforts. If you only have 30 minutes that day to study, you can get in just as much as if you were spending 3 hours. Oftentimes, if you're spending a ton of time in one study session, your brain fizzles out at some point, especially if you have another job, if you are a stay-at-home mom, you've got all these other things going on that your brain might be frazzled by the time you got to studying for real estate. So instead of planning to sit down for 3 hours, plan a 30-minute power session. Go into that session knowing what you're going to study. And I will give you that guide in a little bit that will definitely be helpful with planning. But let's say tonight you're going to go study and you're going to give it 30 minutes and you're going to focus on the elements of a contract. And that is all you do. And then before you're done with that study session, what are you going to focus on next time? Have your plan in place. So when you go to sit down, you're not like, okay, so what am I going to start with? Well, maybe I'll look at Facebook, or I'll try to find different study materials online. And then you end up in this rabbit hole where 45 minutes later, you haven't done anything. So just be very intentional and purposeful with the time that you have to study. And so I talked about the things that are not effective study habits. What is an effective study habit would be, excuse me, if you have flashcards and you're quizzing yourself, or some people will make a matching game, and that's something I've been suggesting for years, and someday maybe I'll actually make it and then retire. But the game like the kids play, where you have to find the cards that have the sharks on them and you keep flipping them over the memory game until you find the two that match, but doing that with the real estate terms or concepts, something just to actively engage your brain in a different way.
To lean on, to have emotional support.
In the Facebook group, we have some additional resources uploaded there. I'll drop the link to that in the chat if you're not part of it. If you go into the files section, I uploaded a couple of resources that I think are super helpful, including some matching type games. Like it's a list of words and then the definitions are on the other side and then you have to match the two together. Things like that stretch your brain in a way that you don't normally use and are going to help commit that information to memory better. So now we're going to go through what to expect. As I mentioned, when we first got started, once you finish your classes and all of your quizzes through your real estate school, it'll take about 24 hours for you to receive an email from AMP-PSI, who is the testing facilitator. They will contact you, reaching out to invite you to schedule your exam. When you do that, there are about 6 locations that are somewhat central to the Puget Sound area for you to choose from. If you have a date in mind or a goal of when you want to have all of this completed, be open-minded to location. Since everything is at 25% capacity, there are a reduced amount of people who can fit into each session. So if you were planning to test in Everett, maybe it's worth the extra 40-minute drive down to Bellevue so that you don't have to choose a different day. So just be open-minded to the location. Unless time doesn't matter, then choose wherever you would like to go. And then once you finish school, you have 2 years to pass the exam. I don't recommend waiting that long. I don't recommend waiting more than a couple months. Truthfully, I would do it within a month. You only have so much capacity in your brain, and the longer you wait, the less you're going to remember. I know a lot of people are like, oh, I want to study a bit longer before I'm ready. Put the date on the calendar. Until it's booked, it's only a dream. It is not a goal. And putting that date on the calendar is going to motivate you to be in your studies. Because if it becomes a someday, you're not going to do it. I've seen so many people who come into real estate school and they are fired up and they are excited and they get done. And then they reschedule and they bump out their tests, and 6 months later they haven't done it, and now they've forgotten everything, and then they just give up because it's been so long. And what a waste of time, money, potential. Like, it just breaks my heart. So my best advice to you is, as soon as you get that email, pick a date, even if it's a month out, even if it's 2 months out, but get it on the calendar and make it real. When you schedule your exam, there is a fee of $138.25 that you pay at the time of scheduling. On the exam itself, there is a total of 135 questions. 100 are on the national, 30 are on the state, and then there are 5 trial questions that are not graded. They don't count towards your score. It's just the testing facilitator practicing future questions on the exam. You're going to have 3.5 hours to take the exam. I've heard of one person who ran out of time. One person in 2 years. So you should have ample time to get through it. When you get there, you're going to be sitting in this little cubicle area with your computer, and they're going to have scratch paper provided. You're not allowed to bring your own, as well as like a little golf pencil that you can use to work through anything. Once you sit down, you are free to jot down anything on that paper. It's yours. So if there's something you can only remember between the car and that seat, jot it down when you sit down. When you're done with your exam, they are going to take that scratch paper back. They're very protective of the exam, making sure that nothing gets out. You will find out immediately how you did. If you get a 70% or better, you have passed the exam. And so they will give you a piece of paper that says, if you passed each section, state is at the top, nationals at the bottom. If you pass, they do not tell you your score. There's no way to get it, which is kind of maddening. If you're anything like me, I tested like 7 years ago, and I still wonder how I did. And then if you don't pass one section or the other, it will also explain that on the sheet. It will break down your scores so you can see which topics you need to schedule, or excuse me, which topics you need to study further. And then if you do end up with that sheet, reach out to me so we can figure out how to help you move forward. On the day of the exam, they are going to require you to bring 2 forms of ID. The name on your ID has to match the name on your test. No exceptions. There was somebody who was recently married and they hadn't updated their license yet, and they had to reschedule because it didn't match. So make sure before you schedule your exam that it matches. The only thing that you will be able to bring to your little cubicle area is a calculator. It has to be a super basic one, nothing programmable. Just, I say, like a dollar store calculator. Super simple. They will take everything you have, your phone, watch, hat, sunglasses. If you're wearing a bulky sweater, they will take that as well. They'll secure it in a backpack or a locker. So, don't bring anything valuable. Don't put on all sorts of stuff. They will take it away. And then some locations will allow you to bring in a water bottle. One of the single-use ones, they will not allow any reusable ones. The reason for all of this security is, a few years ago, somebody snuck out a bunch of the test questions and they had to rewrite the tests. So they really put everything on lockdown to make sure that that does not happen again, and they are very serious about it. Um, just a couple basics. Make sure you get a good night's sleep before. Don't go out partying. Don't stay up all night. Don't go out drinking, whatever that is. Stay home, take care of yourself. Make sure you have something to eat and drink beforehand. And make sure you know where you're going. And then lastly, leave early. If you are late, even by a minute, they will turn you away. So make sure you are on time. Couple of tips and tricks I want to share with you guys. I'm going to go ahead and upload. Well, actually, I'll do that in a second. I apologize. There's all these tips and tricks on ways to pass the exam. Things like the longest answer of the 4 options is usually the right one. If there's 2 that are super similar, pick the one that's the longest. If 2 options are complete opposites, it's probably going to be one of those that is the answer. But even with those kind of tips, the biggest thing that you guys can do to pass this exam is read everything, which sounds so simple, but there's a lot of people who fail because they don't read the questions carefully. So it's going to happen that you'll probably see questions on the exam that you've seen in your studies. And those questions aren't necessarily going to be identical. They can take a question from your practice exams and just throw the word not or isn't into the question, and it's a completely different question. And if you aren't going through them methodically, reading every word of every question, you might miss that, and then you might get the answer wrong simply because you didn't read it, which that sucks. So make sure that you are very methodical. Read every single question, read all 4 answers, read the question again to make sure you understood it the first time, and then choose your answer through a process of elimination. I know that sounds tedious, and there's some of you that are like the high D types that just charge through things. This is not the time for speed. You want to slow it down. Yeah, just take your time. There's no advice I can give you that will help you more than that. So hopefully you take it. I have all of these in the study guide I'm going to share with you in a bit. So if I skip stuff, don't feel like you're not going to get that information later. I also have this noted in the packet. We'll go through just some math tips, formulas, some highlights of things that you're going to need to know in the math portion to do well on that. I call out math specifically because I feel like this is one of the more polarizing topics for most people. So make sure you're understanding your capitalization rates, memorizing the formula, understanding discount points, and remembering that those are 1% of the loan amount, not the purchase price. That's a very common mistake. Make sure you know your conversions. I have a slide on this next one, and make sure you understand mils. I spelled it wrong here. There should be 2 L's, but that is the unit of measurement, financial measurement for applying property taxes. So make sure you know these things. I have some of that repeated here, like the cap rate here at the bottom. All of these conversions you need to have memorized. There are 10 questions on the math portion of the exam, which means it's 10% of the exam. You can still pass without getting a single math question right, but you had better know everything else. So to give yourself a better chance at passing the exam, make sure you know these things, have these memorized. At least 4, maybe 5 of the questions in the math section are going to require this information. And then before we move on to the packet, I wanted to give you guys an update on what's happening with the Department of Licensing. They have been a thorn in my side since July, and it's not getting better. So once you pass your exam, what that process looks like is Well, once you pass your exam, you're not a real estate agent yet. You've only passed your exam. You also need to get your fingerprints and background check done. And once that is done and processed, then you're able to apply for your real estate license. And even then, you're still not a licensed realtor until you've chosen a brokerage and they have made your license active with them. So I want you to be aware that as soon as you pass your exam, you're not going to be able to practice real estate yet. It is going to take a little bit of time, and the amount of time that takes is really dependent on you. The way to expedite that is get your fingerprints and background check done now. Maybe if you're still in school, you can wait a minute. But this website here, identigo.com, is where you can schedule your fingerprints and background check. It's a cost of $42.80, and this is non-optional. You cannot get a real estate license until you've done this. Right
Robin,
now, yes.
when does the 2 years start from when your license is until you have to renew your license? When does it start? When you pass the exam, or when the broker activates it?
It starts when you pay your licensing fee to the DOL.
Okay.
So that is after the fingerprints are done and processed. So yeah, passing your exam, that timeline really doesn't affect anything with licensing. Interestingly enough, I mean, it's a huge hurdle to get over, but once you get over that, there's a few more steps that are kind of more important, if that makes sense.
Okay.
So that starts as soon as you pay for it. So I cannot stress enough to get this done as soon as you can. They will put these on hold for a few months. They're not going to disappear. They'll be in there somewhere. When you go get your fingerprints done, there's a little piece of paper that they give you. And I don't have this anywhere, so you might want to take a note. The little piece of paper, it has your TCN number. And that number is extraordinarily important. Do not lose that little piece of paper. If you lose pieces of paper, take a picture of it, save it somewhere. If there ever is any issue with linking your fingerprints, that TCN number is your tracking number. Yeah, right now, the DOL tells me they are 50 days behind on processing. I don't think that's true because we've had people pass, but they are definitely taking the full 14 days to process. So if you can get this done before you test, then the only delay is about 3 or 4 days for PSI to communicate to the state that you did pass and you're eligible to get your license. All right, so I do not have this in the packet like this, so you might want to take a picture. I think this is super helpful. I do need to update the packet a little bit with this. There's just only so many hours in the day, but so this is information that I got from the testing facilitator. This isn't anything that was shared with me or created by me. This is straight from them, and it's on their website. So over here, the 100 questions on the national portion are all broken down, and I have them sorted in order of importance. With contracts being the most important topic for you to know inside and out, with 17 questions on the exam. So this is a huge piece right here. And then you can see how these numbers drop down to leasing and property management with only 3 questions. I wouldn't even study that. This is not worth your time. This up here is worth a lot of your time. So you can kind of take a look at this, and this tells you what your priority is. For the state portion, I have the same breakdown over here. I included the percentages because 100 questions, the percentages equal the number of questions. So with the Washington statutes and rules governing the activities of licensees at 43%, if you don't know this one well, you are not going to pass the state. And I make it sound like everybody fails. They don't. There are a decent amount of people who don't pass the first time, and a relatively decent amount of people who need multiple times to take the exam. But then there's about half that do pass on their first attempt. So it's not, I don't mean to make it sound like it's this unsurmountable mountain, because it's not. You just need to prepare. All right. So I am going to pull up a packet that I am going to upload into the chat for you. That'll take a second to upload and should be available to you guys now. And I just want to run through this together really quick, not the whole thing, but in this packet, I have advice from agents who had passed the test not too long ago, what they did that helped them get through that. I have some additional resources listed on the back, as well as all of my contact information. I've summarized those tips and tricks that I had shared, but I want to go through the first couple pages of this with you. So on this page, this is that same breakdown that I had on this slide here. Same breakdown, just in a different order. And down here, I'm going to put these side by side and make this a little bigger. Bear with me. So this here is a fully broken out breakdown of this. So here we've got this 13 questions for the Washington statutes, blah, blah, blah. Right here, the 13 questions for the Washington statutes. And then it tells you exactly what falls under those categories. So then when you're studying, you know exactly what information you need to be focusing on. So this little half piece of paper right here is your study guide for the state portion of the exam. So then you know what these 8 questions consist of, where they're going to pull that information from, and what you need to know. On the next pages, these next 2 pages, this is a breakdown of this state portion here. So this information, oops, like let's take, let me go down to this one right here. We have contracts, right? 7 recall and recognition questions and 10 application and analysis questions for a total of 17 questions. So this goes through and breaks all of this down of all of the things that you need to know and have memorized and be super familiar with. So these things here, the recall and recognition, application and analysis, what that is, I have very small at the bottom of the 4th page. So right here, the testing facilitator explains how they're testing you. So recall and recognition, basic memorization of topics. Can you tell me the definition of a warranty deed or your property taxes? Do you understand what those words mean? And then application. In what situation would you use a warranty deed? Who would that apply to? Who does it not apply to? So basically, when would you use that topic? And then analysis, using your judgment. In this, for example, in this specific situation, would you use a warranty deed or a statutory warranty deed or a quitclaim deed? So then you're having to use your judgment based on a specific scenario. So it's not just memorization of the definitions, it's also using your judgment, having an understanding of the situations where that term or concept would apply. So I think that's really helpful when you're studying as well, so that you know it's not just a memorization of the info, it's also being able to interpret it. So this should help you guys tremendously. You shouldn't have to wonder what you need to know, what information isn't important and what is. This will detail all of it for you. So if you wanted to go through this, use this slide as a reference and be like, okay, from this day forward or from the day I finish school forward, this is how I'm studying. I'm going to start with contracts, and then you'll go through. And if your half hour that night or however much time only gets you down through like topic 6, then you know next time you sit down to study, you're picking up with topic 7. So hopefully this gives you guys some direction and helps take some of that time of planning and wondering what you need to be doing out of the equation. Before we move on to any sort of topic breakdown or anything like that, do you guys have any questions on what we covered so far? Or is there anything I
How do
didn't
we get
cover?
that? How do we get that package?
So do you see the chat box?
I do, but I don't see a link to it. I only see the link to the Facebook group.
Okay, nothing came in after that? Weird.
Not for me, at least.
Okay, let me try attaching that as a link so that you can download it from the link instead.
I see that PDF file, the test prep handout.
Yeah, I've had this happen before. For some reason, some people can get it and some people don't. I don't know. No problem. I'll just attach the link.
Thank you.
Of course. And does anybody else have any questions on the stuff we've covered so far? Okay. So then I want to take the next 25 minutes or so and hear what you guys want help on. Is there any topic, concept, anything that we could possibly walk through or talk about that would be helpful for you?
Can we go over agency?
Okay.
Which is the second biggest part of the test, right?
Yeah, I think it's 13 questions.
Yeah, I'll be happy to go over that if everyone else is.
Does anybody else have any other requests? Okay.
Can we also maybe touch on, I know we touched on this recently, but just some advice as far as studying for the state, specifically the state portion?
Yeah, excuse me. So let's start with that because unfortunately, that is sort of a short conversation. Finding resources for help with the state portion is tough. There are resources out there like Quizlet or Prep Agent that help with the national portion. But as far as state, there's not a whole lot out there. My best recommendation on that is to, carefully go through that little study guide for the state portion. And then in the Facebook group, and actually, let me share something with you guys too. I don't know if I've shared this out with everybody yet, but I've started a YouTube playlist of all of the test preps from 2021. So I will share that with you guys in the chat as well. Just give me a second to find it. There we go. So this will change almost every week. Every time I do one of these, I'm going to post a new video to the YouTube link. So I do also post them in the Facebook group, but if you, I'm sorry, I'm trying to multitask and it sounds like I'm trying to multitask. I do have multiple videos where I've covered state topics that might be helpful, not because I know everything, but because I don't know of a lot of other resources out there for you guys. So I would recommend that, going back into the Facebook group and looking for, searching for state or state topic, and then I'll pull up any that I've done. I've been doing that Facebook group for about 8 months, so all of them should be there. I would probably do that. Go by the study guide and then watch my previous videos. You can kind of fast forward to the first half. And I think that might help, hopefully. And if it doesn't, let me know. All right, so let's dive into agency. As Joseph said, this is one of the larger topics on the exam with 13 questions. It's tied with real estate practices as the top topics on the national portion. So let me pull this up so we can make sure we're covering everything. So over here is general principles of agency. And we'll just dive in. So what I'm going to do is I just kind of talk through this. If I can give you examples or, real world examples that help commit this stuff to memory or make it a little bit easier to understand, that's what I try to do. If you guys have questions, feel free to, click the raise your hand button, unmute yourselves, drop something in the chat. I'll be sure to have that open and keep an eye out. So agency and non-agency relationships, there are 2 questions on this, and that includes types of agents and agencies, and then other brokerage relationships. So types of agents and agencies. So when they are talking about types of agents, hold on, let me make sure they don't have this somewhere else before I assume that's where it belongs. No, I feel good. Okay. So there's a few things that fall under this with the types of agents and agencies. So firstly, just so if you haven't gotten to this part yet, or if it's been a minute, agency is the relationship between you as the real estate agent and the client. It is a set of laws that govern how we do business, and that is information that we share with our clients. We have a little pamphlet that you provide to them. It's called the Law of Agency, and it explains that these are my duties to you as a real estate agent, and at a minimum, this is the kind of things that you can expect from me and my level of service. We'll dive into like the duties of the agency relationship further down here, but so with the agency relationship, there is the principal and the agent. The principal being the party that's hiring you, the buyer or the seller. They are considered the principal, and you, of course, are the agent, someone who is given authorization to act on someone else's behalf, to represent somebody else, the principal. So that is the basic agency relationship with a sub-agency relationship as well. And that is the relationship between the brokerage, and the licensees who are part of that brokerage. So agency works not just with the principal, but also with the brokerage itself when we're talking about sub-agency only. The reason it's called sub-agent is when a client signs an agreement, they are signing that agreement with the brokerage. And then the brokerage is assigning that contract to you, or that agency agreement to you. So always the agency agreement is with the brokerage, and you are appointed as the sub-agent, or you are the sub-agent within the brokerage. Hopefully that makes sense. I feel like that really, honestly, is it on that. Super simple. I do think that maybe the universal, general, and special agencies fall under that as well. So I'll touch on this now. So as an agent, or excuse me, with agency, some portions of this information does not pertain only to real estate. It does apply in other scenarios. And I think with some of these topics like contracts, that applies to all contracts, whether it's a car or a contract between two people for employment. It's not just real estate. Same with agency. So with universal, general, and special agents, these are 3 different scopes of authority that you can have in an agency situation. So a universal agent, I like to think, well, of these 3 things as a funnel. So a universal agent, the widest part of the funnel, that is the greatest amount of authorization you can have. So meaning that, like, if somebody were elderly or sick, they may give power of attorney over their estate to the decisions in their life, even deciding whether or not to keep them on life support or not. So that could be absolutely everything in their life that another person is giving the authority to not control, but have authority over. And then there's the general agent, which is assigned to handle specific areas of an entity or a person's affairs. And Joseph is right. A general agent would be similar to a property manager. The owner of that property may own 10 different properties, and he's not giving permission to that property manager to have authority over all of them. It's only that specific property. So that is general agency. And then we have special agents. Guys, we're special agents. So a special agency is over a specific thing, transaction, situation. It's very detailed to one scenario. In our situation, buying or selling property. So those boundaries of authority, you can't cross over those. You can't get a listing agreement with a client and then decide to take them off life support. Your authority just doesn't apply in that situation. So hopefully that's a little helpful in understanding how that portion is not just real estate, but it happens in everything in everyday life. So other brokerage relationships, non-agents, transactional, and facilitators. So a transactional relationship is one that literally only happens during that transaction. So a transactional relationship might be your accountant. If you're not like going to them consistently, like if you go to H&R Block, you might not get the same person every time and you might not care. That would be like a transitional relationship. Or with a facilitator, I feel like I need to look at the book for this. Give me one moment. I think I know, but I don't want to give you guys the wrong information. So sometimes it takes me a minute with a little bit of this because one, it's been a minute since I've heard a few of these words. And then once you get out in business, the silver lining of school is you're not going to use most of this. So you are able to forget it. With the facilitators, so this would be something like title and escrow. With title and escrow relationships, those are also transactional. However, in those relationships, they're giving kind of like a special agency, but it's just very specific to just handling that one transaction. They're not really given much authority other than dispersing funds, but it would be even more specific than the special agency. And of course, both of these things are related to non-real estate agents. So then the agent's duties to the clients. So this is something that you will hear about in your career. This is something that you will discuss with your clients. You should be discussing with your clients, maybe not in depth, but at least touching on before they sign any sort of listing agreement or buyer's agency agreement with you. So there are a few very specific things that you're required to provide to your client. The first one is reasonable. Well, let me back up. They talk about fiduciary responsibilities first. So let's talk about that. There is a difference, and you won't be tested on this. This is more like something we talk about once you're licensed. And when I say transactional, this has nothing to do with this. But in real estate, there are typically two types of agents, transactional and fiduciaries. There should only be fiduciaries. However, when you are not upholding your end of your agency duties to your client, that's when you become a transactional agent, meaning that that relationship, the quality of service, going above and beyond to maintain that relationship, to get return business, doesn't happen. You're there to get a check and then you're done. Whereas a fiduciary, which we all are and should act as, we're in a special place of trust. We are positioning ourselves as the experts in the market. And because we are presenting ourselves that way, we earn a client's trust. They believe what we have to say because we tell them that we have the authority for them to believe what we say. And because of that, we have these additional requirements of how we treat them and what we do in our businesses to ensure that we are the fiduciary that they should be getting in a real estate transaction. First one is reasonable care and skill. Pretty self-explanatory. If you are incompetent or negligent in your work, then that is a violation of agency law, meaning that, you need to take your time and be careful when you're writing these contracts, understanding how these forms impact your client and their potential life. So just really being careful about studying the information, knowing your stuff, and being able to be a quality agent that they're paying you for. The second one is honesty and good faith. I feel like that is also pretty self-explanatory. Not telling your clients things that just aren't true, not stretching the truth, being very honest and clear with them, and not puffing. So they touch on that as well. Puffing is like when you kind of stretch the truth. And I'll be honest, all real estate agents do this in their marketing. When you walk into a home and you're looking at the flyer and it says enormous great room with beautiful water views, and you're like, this room is 10 by 10 and I can only see the water if I stick my head out the window and, crane my neck. So that happens, but, full out, lying, of course, not okay. The third duty is presenting all written communications. So if you are a listing agent and you receive an offer on the property, and let's say you have it listed for $800,000 and the offer is for $750,000, that's a terrible offer, especially in this market. But even if your client said to you, I do not want to see a single offer under $800,000, you are required by law to still send them a copy of that contract, or that offer, excuse me. Even if they don't want to see it, you can say, you give them a call. I know you said that you don't want to see an offer under $800,000, but I have a legal obligation, so I just emailed that over to you. So just making sure that they see all of that, and not just an offer, but even throughout the process of a transaction, it's possible that addendums or changes to the contract are going to happen, and all of those, no matter how ridiculous, do need to be shared. The fourth one is disclosure of material facts. So let's talk about the difference between a material fact and a latent defect. So a material fact is defined as information that has a substantial negative effect on the value of the property or on a party's ability to perform their contract duties. So with something like that, an example of a material fact would be, an example that they give in the book would be if the seller was in the middle of a bankruptcy, they may not have the right to sell that property. So although I wouldn't plaster that all over the internet, it should be something that is disclosed when you're getting offers or beforehand, or as real estate agents, we have private comments that the public don't see in our systems. That's where I would note something like that. A latent defect is an actual physical issue with the property. And it could be something that's happened in the past. It could be something that's presently happening. If there had been a window that leaked or the roof that leaked, if there's a question on the property disclosure that asks about it, then your client needs to be honest about it. And if they tell you about a situation like that and they don't want to be honest about it, you were required to either make them be honest or walk away from the transaction, because losing, well, let me back up. If you allow your client to lie to a potential buyer, you are equally culpable. You could be sued, you could lose your license. And it's just not worth whatever that commission would be to potentially not earn another one again. So you must disclose material facts and latent defects. The fifth one is accounting for trust funds. Trust funds are typically earnest money. So whenever earnest money is changing hands, there needs to be a paper trail, and you need to keep track of that regardless of if you represent the buyer or the seller. If you represent the buyer, you have a duty to ensure their money ends up where it's supposed to. If you represent the seller, you have a duty to your client to ensure that those timelines are being met and the buyer is doing all the things that they should be doing to make the transaction close. So accounting for trust funds, finding the paper trail, or if you're part of the movement of those funds, meaning if a client hands you a check and you take it to escrow, or you have somebody come pick it up, then that needs to be accounted for. Number 6 is providing an agency law pamphlet. That's a little booklet I touched on that details all of this. It puts it all in super plain language. It might be helpful for you to read it if you're having any sort of struggles with understanding the law of agency. I'm going to try to multitask and pull up a copy of this and drop it in the chat while I'm going through this and not skip a beat. Let's see if I can do it. I just uploaded that for you guys. And then the last one, number 7, is making an agency disclosure. And so this is something that's included on the first page of the purchase and sale agreement, basically stating which party you represent, which party the other agent represents, or if there is no agency, disclosing that as well. So it's just a statement making it very clear who works for who is representing who, and who has that special agency with which client. So we are kind of out of time. I didn't get to go through nearly as much as I had hoped, but this powers of attorney and other delegation of authority, that is that universal, general, and then special agency. So we got through a little less than half. Were you guys able to see that agency law pamphlet attached? I can try to make it a link too. Give me a second.
I didn't get that either, so probably the link will work better.
Okay.
Thank you.
A moment, yeah.
Yeah, same
And-
here. It might have to do with being on like the mobile Zoom app
It
because
might be.
I can't see any files.
Okay, no problem. It was just those two, so you should be good. All right, Christian asked, are the mock exams in the Rockwell Broker Cram a pretty close representation of the actual final exam? They're not exact, but they are pretty close. They're going to be the same like style of questions, the same like rhythm. They're not going to be the exact same questions though. I'm not going to pretend that this is an easy test. I've had some people say, oh, I had no problem. I flew right through it. And then other people who really struggled. So I've found no rhythm to, none. Like, it is impossible to predict who is going to pass and who won't. So, I mean, yes, you can expect that the questions will be similar, but the likelihood of you getting the exact same questions is pretty slim to none. Yay, Joseph, March 16th, awesome. One thing I didn't mention was what happens if you don't pass. If you don't pass your exam or you only pass one portion, you can retest until you do pass. There is no limit on the amount of times that you can test. The caveat is you do have to pay the $138.25 each time. Even if you're only retaking one portion, they don't split out that fee. It's the same no matter what. If you pass one portion of the exam and not the other, you have 6 months to pass both portions. And if you don't, at that 6-month period, you have to retake both portions again. And again, you have a limit of 2 years from finishing school until your schooling record expires. So before we take off, does anybody have any questions? Okay. Well, if you think of anything, my information is listed on the back of that packet. I have my phone number and my email. You can call, text, email me, anything. I'm happy to help however I can. Again, that Facebook group under the files section, some of that stuff, yes, I may have uploaded it like a year ago, but I promise you it's still accurate. There has been no changes to the testing material. And I think it's been like 2 years. So you should be totally good with everything I have uploaded there. And I even have some pre-made flashcards, so you can print those out, cut them out. And if you need anything, reach out. The next one of these I will do next Saturday. So Saturday the 20th is going to be from 10 to 12. It's a 2-hour Saturday morning session. I do that once a month. I'm going to drop the link in the chat so that if you wanted to register for that, you have that link. I also have the info for that in the Facebook group as well. And the April schedule I should have rolling out here in the next week or so. And then I will email it out to everybody. All right, have a lovely day. Have a great rest of your week. And hopefully I will see you guys on Saturday, unless you're testing before then. And then I hope to not see you on here. All right, have a great day.